Do y'all remember some time ago when the New England Patriots dominated the AFC, and there was a stretch where they made, I think, what, three, four Super Bowls in a row, something like that, and it was getting to a point where before the season even started, you just knew the Patriots were going to represent the AFC in the big game. Well, now we're seeing the same thing with the Chiefs as they have now made their fifth Super Bowl appearance in 6 years. They made their third Super Bowl appearance in a row. It's getting to the point now where before the season starts nowadays, you just know that the Chiefs are going to be in the Super Bowl. So it's just deja vu all over again. And they're facing a familiar opponent, the Philadelphia Eagles from the NFC. It'll be a rematch of the big game from 2 years ago. And Thaddeus and I are going to be previewing it right here on Total Sports Talk. What is up, everybody? This is David Street here with my co-host Thaddeus Lloyd.
Hello.
Thaddeus, man, it's been a while. How have you been,
Not too bad. Not too bad. How have you been doing?
dude? Good, man. But I've been busy lately, but we're back now, and it's I'm happy to be back. And I kind of want to just dive right in about how each team got here, starting with the Philadelphia Eagles. And to me, it's two main reasons that they got here. That was defense and running. First of all, the Eagles had by far the best defense in the NFL, at least in terms of total defense, because they were the only team in the league to allow less than 300 yards a game, and they were ahead of the next best team by about 20, 25 yards, something like that. Their secondary was the best in the NFL, highlighted by ball hawks like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, shout out the University of Florida there, and Reed Blankenship, who both combined for 10 interceptions. Right, their defensive line wasn't as good statistically, but make no mistake, guys like Jalen Carter, who's that one dude? Uh, uh, Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, just all the Georgia guys, just all contributed to an overall dominant defensive effort for the season. And of course, when you have Vic Fangio calling the plays, Vic Fangio, who is one of the great defensive minds of our time and really in NFL history, you combine him with a roster like that on defense, you're more than likely going to yield good results. And then as for the running game, well, what's interesting to me, Thad, and I was actually thinking about this when I was driving today, right? When you consider how absolutely dominant Saquon Barkley was, I mean, he had one of the best seasons for a running back in NFL history. One of the very few guys to top 2,000 yards. And it's interesting because I was thinking, was there ever a time in my lifetime? I'm 30 years old to give you an idea of my lifetime. But was there ever a time when a team had a running back with a season this dominant and they made the Super Bowl? And I can't remember, right? Derrick Henry had a 2,000-yard season with the Titans, and he's still doing great with the Ravens. But Derrick Henry has never made the Super Bowl, right? Chris Johnson also had a 2,000-yard season with the Titans. The Titans have not made the Super Bowl since the 1999 season. There was Priest Holmes with the Chiefs. I think he had 2,000 yards on the ground, if I remember correctly. But the Chiefs did not make the Super Bowl during his time there, right? Um, unless there is one other play. Oh, and Adrian Peterson, right? He was dominant with the Vikings. He had a 2,000-yard season, and the Vikings have not made the Super Bowl this century. So unless there's some other guy that I'm not thinking of right now, Saquon Barkley, to the best of my knowledge, is the only guy to have a season the way that he did and make the Super Bowl. Thaddeus, I know, you're younger than me by a few years, but can you remember the last time a running back had a season as dominant as Saquon, both in terms of dominating the regular season and leading his team to the Super Bowl?
Well, it depends which scope you look this through. If you look at through 2,000 yards, yes, he's the first. He might be even the first because he's I believe the seventh or eighth rusher to have 2,000 yards in a season. Incredible achievement, and he did it without that extra game, and they sat him for that game, so it makes it even more legitimate, which is actually really awesome to see. Um, but as far as dominant, we kind of forgot about last year's best running back, which was my 49ers running back, Christian McCaffrey,
There you
who
go. There was one guy that I was forgetting.
didn't have 2,000 yards receiving, but he had, I believe, 1,300 yards rushing and over 800 receiving.
Yeah,
So overall, 2,000 yards, and he made the Super Bowl. It was like one out of two seasons that he's had that he's been healthy. So that was that was a really good running back season. But as far as this year goes, Saquon just unbelievable, running behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, top three. First time in his career that he's had an actually decent offensive line, and he totally ran with it. And also, I got to give props to this coaching staff. Like you mentioned, Vic Fangio, Kellen Moore did a great job because normally, when he was the Cowboys OC, and another OC, I forgot where else he went, but he was normally, RPO, five wide, spread him out, almost air raid style kind of offense. Well, he suited his play sheet to the team, which is really cool. And of course, the team's strength is leaning on that run. And well, they leaned on that run very heavily regular season and postseason. They didn't collapse like the last year's Ravens, where they just stopped running the ball in the championship game. Like, no, let's just hand it off to our best player and
yeah,
let him run with it. And bam, almost over 200 yards. They score the most points in an NFC Championship game, and in the history of NFC Championship games. It's really crazy what's been happening, and they've been doing it with what many people consider not a top of the league head coach and a quarterback who some say he's good, but
yeah,
he's not elite like a lot of quarterbacks. Like you think elite quarterbacks will take you to the Super Bowl. Well, every once in a while there's just an okay quarterback who will take you to the Super Bowl. That might be Jalen Hurts. Now he took him to the Super Bowl 2 years ago when he was elite, but the past couple years he just isn't the same player, especially after he had that knee injury.
yeah,
So
and
yeah,
yeah, and and let's talk about Jalen Hurts. I think the term system quarterback often gets thrown around wrongly. But I think in this case, Jalen Hurts is a system quarterback. And Eagles fans, before you jump down my throat, okay, I mean that as a compliment because I mean that he is a perfect fit for that system. Is he a top five, top 10 quarterback? No, I don't think so, right? But he is a perfect fit for that system. Obviously, Saquon Barkley was the one who stole the show, but Jalen Hurts contributed as well with his dual threat ability. I think he's a better runner than he is as a passer. But Philadelphia is a run first team, and when you have a quarterback and running back that both can run and rack up 10 plus touchdowns, you have a pretty good recipe there as well. And I tell you what, Thad, for a guy who's just an okay quarterback. I mean, you said it yourself. He's taken the Eagles to the Super Bowl two times in 3 years, right? That's more than Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud. So, uh, Jalen Hurts might be the best average quarterback of all time. Maybe not all time, but you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's also he is a good player. I'm not I'm not throwing out he's a bad quarterback or anything. So it is actually incredible. He's had more appearances than a lot of the elite AFC quarterbacks. Now, is that due to Patrick Mahomes being in the AFC? Probably.
Yeah,
Um, the NFC, it's totally been crazy, especially since Aaron Rodgers has left, because the NFC doesn't have an elite quarterback. It feels like we've got a couple, very talented quarterbacks, but are they elite? So that's the question. And because if you list off, like most people list off the top five quarterbacks right now, all of them are going to be in the AFC. So it's really a testament to Jalen Hurts how he's been able to reach the Super Bowl with how crazy the NFC is, because it's you got more parity over there. But it's also, I think, giving credit to the GM Howie Roseman.
yeah,
People called for Howie Roseman's head after the 2020 season. After Nick Foles left the team, they drafted Jalen Hurts. They did not do well that season, and people like calling for his head. He flipped that around like nobody's business, instantly making great moves. AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley 2 years ago, trading for offensive linemen, drafting international offensive linemen, and building the Georgia defense the past couple of years. It's been an incredible job by Roseman. And when we get into the roster part of this, the Eagles roster might be the best in the NFL. Everyone was saying
yeah.
the Lions, they kind of got injured this season, but even if they weren't injured, I'd still believe that the Eagles would be a better team than the Lions.
Well, and I think that's a great segue, Thaddeus, into what I want to talk about next because to me, the Eagles making the Super Bowl was simultaneously a surprise and not a surprise. And you might be thinking, well, how is it surprising? Well, let's just go over why it was not surprising. And you said it yourself. This is arguably the best roster in the NFL. Certainly, I think the best offensive line in the NFL, and a huge reason why Saquon was able to have the season that he had. Now, Saquon has always been a great running back, right? Like he was great for the Giants, but the Giants never really had a top 10, top 5 offensive line. You put him behind that offensive line, and he has one of the best seasons ever. I mean, yeah, that's certainly a big credit to the Eagles' offensive line, right? But the reason why I say it's also surprising is because let's not forget that last year the Eagles collapsed toward the end of the season, which culminated in a blowout loss to the Buccaneers in the playoffs. And then this year, right? And of course, when that happened, everybody was calling for Sirianni's head. And then this year, the Eagles get off to a 2-2 start. And that 2-2 start culminated in again a blowout loss to the Buccaneers. And so all the fire Sirianni talks are just heating up. But what's really interesting is that after that 2-2 start, they really kind of just quietly dominated and minded their own business. While everybody was focused on the Lions, who had a very dominant season, the Chiefs, everybody was tuning in to see them fail, and even the Vikings, because Sam Darnold just kind of came out of nowhere to have his best season ever. Nobody was really talking about the Eagles, and yet here they were, just as I said, just winning all these games, quietly minding their own business, and now here they are. And since they're one of the two teams left, everybody's talking about them now.
Yeah, it's a big turnaround, and it was it was kind of sneaky. Um, yeah, because like you said, everyone was paying attention to the Lions. Like they had statistically one of the most dominant seasons. They were plus like 210 on the season, which is insane. So they were the number one seed, but it's always the number two seeds that sneak behind you, and it was the Eagles this year, and yeah, they were just super consistent. Like you said, kept their head down and never really took the gas off the pedal. Specifically, Saquon didn't. Um, but yeah, it was just really flew under the radar for the most part, and it was really impressive because, like you said, that 2-2 start, everyone calling for Sirianni's head. I think it was more so the fact that Vic Fangio was able to get that defense together, because that defense was not doing that great.
Agreed.
And they started getting those midseason injuries. Brandon Graham was out for most of the year. after the first couple weeks. He's going to be back in the Super Bowl, by the way, I heard. I think he's good to go for that. But Vic Fangio and these coordinators and Kellen Moore finally were able to mold this team and join together with their play styles. And, to say it depends on how long the NFL season is. But the two things happen as the season goes along. Either you get more injured, you're a really good team, but you get more injured during the season, so you kind of falter, or you kind of have a bad start, but you get it together and you get better as you went along. And it was the Eagles who went better. It got better as it went along, and it culminated in the 55-point win in the NFC Championship. And now, I'm not saying they're going to score 55 again. I honestly don't know what the score is going to be like, but it
Yeah,
might be offensive fireworks for the Super Bowl.
yeah. I mean, I think to be honest, I think that 55 points was ever so slightly misleading. And I only say that because I think toward the end, Washington just kind of gave up, and they were like, "All right, whatever. We're not going to win this anyway." And that is a good point about the defense in the beginning because people did forget, like people do forget. Well, maybe not Eagles fans, but people do forget that the defense was not good in the beginning, and the fact that they were able to turn around, and then, as I said, they were the only team in the league to allow less than 300 yards a game, and that was incredible. And now let's get to the Chiefs and how they got there. Right, the Chiefs also had a good defense, but for me, the Chiefs for the Chiefs, it was both the defense and it was the fact that they just know how to win games, right? They know how to come up in the clutch, and you can say whatever you want about the refs helping them and whatnot, but listen, man, when you win as many games as the Chiefs have, like not just this year, but really for the past 5 6 years, there it just comes to a point where it's ingrained in their DNA. And if there's any team that knows how to win, it is the Chiefs. Oh, and having Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey certainly helps as well.
Yeah, most definitely. They all season, everyone was like you said, they were watching those games not because they were going to win, but because to see if they were going to fail. But every single time, it was the most bizarre season I think we've seen because last year they were entirely dependent on that defense, and I think they were the third seed last year, so they did lose a couple games. This season they got even better, but I believe they what was it? I think their point differential was like the lowest point differential for a 15 win team or 16 win team in NFL history. Like they're winning every single game by a field goal or less basically. And it was like how do they keep on doing this? Well, they have supreme culture. They have experienced coaches. So they got Andy Reid, obviously. He's been to a couple Super Bowls. Steve Spagnuolo, excellent defensive coordinator. Now he tried to take a head coaching job, found out that wasn't for him, and he is stuck with the Chiefs. And he might be the best defensive coordinator this century, maybe top three defensive coordinator all time, because he's shut down some very impressive offenses. So you got that going for him, and then you just have the personnel as well. Um, the Chiefs GM, forgot what his name was. He's been doing a fantastic job drafting. And you say, well, this Chiefs roster from top to bottom doesn't seem like it's top five, but especially in football, you win by technicality. So you have to play it right. And a lot of teams we saw this season, we saw it with the Bears, we saw it with the Colts, we saw it with a bunch of teams, we saw it with the Raiders, where it's a really close game. The Chiefs allow you to be in the game, like because their roster, like I said, isn't probably top five, but they're going to keep the game close. So when the game's really close, and we got like 4 or 5 minutes left, one score game, but then you look at the end of the game and the Chiefs win the game. You're like, how'd this happen? They win just like the Patriots did earlier this season or this century.
Mhm.
They won because they were very finite and very technical with the little things, timeouts, running out of bounds, those kind of basic things, which a lot of newer coaches, teams that don't have a lot of playoff experience, they get wrong. But this team, it's a seasoned team. Like you said, we know they've been to, this is their third straight Super Bowl. They have a lot of playoff experience than most other teams just don't have. They know how to get there. They know how to execute in the final minutes of games. And well, look what happens. They just keep on winning games despite, not dominating really any game
Yeah,
all this season.
yeah, no, like it is really interesting because they did win 15 games, but they didn't play like they won 15 games. I mean, statistically speaking, this was the worst 15-win team that we've ever seen. You know, they ended up with a like a plus 55, plus 54, point differential. Now, Chiefs
Yeah.
fans are going to be quick to point out, like, well, they were sitting all their starters in the final game. Okay, yeah, I mean, even before that game, they still had a less than plus 100 point differential. You know, I remember, Dad. Do you remember the when the Carolina Panthers went 15-1?
Yeah.
You know, and I remember like back then people were talking about how the Panthers were the worst 15-win team ever. But I remember that Panthers team got better and better and better through each and every game to the point where they were just a totally dominant team toward the end of the season. The Chiefs never really exuded that kind of dominance. I mean, they didn't even have a single win by 20 points this season. But hey, you know what? At the end of the day, none of that really matters so much because it's all about winning, right? And I think most of us would say we would rather have we would rather look bad and win than look good and lose, right?
Yeah. It's totally the case because any win in the NFL, a lot of you hear, if you listen to interviews and with players and coaches, they say any win is a win in the NFL. What makes the NFL so special and, what's the number one sport in America or number one league in America is because every single game counts. And you will take any win you can get in the NFL. You obviously, just a little bit of a side rant, but you have a lot of teams, you have a lot of fan bases of bad teams when they're down a lot. They only have like 2, 3 wins on the season. Like, just tank, just lose the rest of the games. You can get a better draft pick. It's for the draft pick. That is not the case inside that locker room. Players want to win that game no matter what because most of them their jobs are on the line. So they're still going to want to win that game. Every team, as they say, one of the biggest sayings in the NFL is any given Sunday.
Hmm.
It's absolutely the case because they're at least once a week, 1 to 2 times a week. There's always a huge upset, and that's what keeps it so entertaining.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we get into um, offense, defense, special teams coaching, and just determine who we think has the advantage there. Now, I want to be very careful here because I don't want to just use stats to form our arguments. Yeah, obviously we are going to use stats because numbers don't lie, but numbers often don't tell the whole story. And so let's talk about the offenses first, right? And when I talk about how numbers often don't tell the whole story, right? Well, on paper, and well, maybe not on paper, but on the field, the Eagles had a better offense than the Chiefs. You know, they were I don't know if they were top 5 in scoring, but I think they were at least top 10 in scoring, and a large part of that was because of Saquon Barkley, who we have harped on the fact that he had one of the best seasons of all time for a running back, right? Whereas you look at the Chiefs offensively, they were average at best offensively. But here's where I want to be careful, okay? Because even though statistically speaking, the Eagles had a better offense, I'm going to give the offensive advantage to the Chiefs, Dad. And the reason why I say that is because one of the things that stats often don't take into account for is historical impact, right? And what I mean by that is that, like I said, on paper, the Chiefs were average at best offensively, but paper doesn't win you games. And we've seen how good the Chiefs offense can be. And we've seen Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey come up big in clutch moments. And so, and at the end of the day, when it comes to a quarterback receiving standpoint, all right, I'm going to trust Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey over Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown. So again, even though statistically speaking, the Eagles were better on offense, right? I just cannot take that. I just cannot take Jalen Hurts over Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. That's why I give the advantage to the Chiefs offensively.
Yeah, because obviously, and I really actually want Saquon to win the MVP. He deserves it. Now, but if you do say that, then I would have said Christian McCaffrey should have won the MVP because Lamar had a middling season according to his standards last year. So that's a whole different discussion. But Saquon is amazing, but he's not a quarterback. And the most important position in football is the quarterback. And like I've said, Jalen, it's been impressive how he's made it to two Super Bowls. He's had an amazing team around him to do it. But obviously, you're going to trust Patrick Mahomes, one of the most insane quarterbacks ever. I mean, talent wise, he's pretty good, but it's also the mental side of the game. He's had more achievements before turning 30 than, Drew Brees, Dan Marino, all these other, great quarterbacks who took it well into their 30s to achieve that legendary status. And he's just done it in 7 seasons, and it's crazy to think. So obviously, he's already probably, especially if he wins the Super Bowl, might be the best quarterback of all time. Obviously, say Tom Brady, but Patrick Mahomes, as far as like we were saying with the stats, Tom Brady has won. Did Tom Brady won 21 playoff games, and his last playoff game he was 42 years old. Patrick Mahomes has already won 17, and he's 28 or
Yeah,
27, 28.
yeah.
So it's already insane how much how good he is in the playoffs. So you just do not bet against Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, so I will also be taking Patrick Mahomes over Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a fine quarterback, but he's not Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
Nobody.
yeah, exactly. And then also just, I think we both understand that, just because we say that a team has an advantage on a certain side of the ball, that doesn't mean it's guaranteed they're going to be better. We're just kind of, you know, judging it by how we see it. Now, let's go over to the other side of the ball on defense. Yeah, this is not even a question for me. It's the Eagles. I will take the Eagles 10 times out of 10 over the Chiefs on defense, right? We already talked about how they had the best defense um, in 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 the NFL. As I said before, they were the only team to allow less than 300 yards a game. And then what's kind of interesting here, Thad, is that at least in the regular season, the Eagles' pass rush was actually average at best. Like if you look at their pass rush numbers, pressures, quarterback hits, sacks, they were middle of the pack to below average in a lot of those categories. Right? They were middle of the pack in sacks, but in 3 playoff games, they have sacked quarterbacks a total of 10 times. That would average out to about 57 sacks in a 17-game season, which would have been second best in the NFL this season, right? So they've really kind of stepped up their pass rush in the postseason. Why do you think they've been able to do that? Because as I said, it was average at best in the regular season, but now they're just playing on a whole different level in the postseason.
Well, I think, well, obviously, we know this defensive line is really good, but I think you have to look at the offensive lines who they played against. You played against the Rams. Now, the Rams have a good to average O line, but they played they played against Matthew Stafford, who's one of the last pure pocket passers,
Mhm.
and just they played against kind of a weak Rams offensive line. They were shuffling around through the entire season. So it was a good performance, but well, the Rams' defensive line against that Eagles' offensive line was crazy. Um,
Yeah.
but so they played against that, and then they played against a Washington offensive line, which coming into the season was seen as a net negative for the team. Was seen as the weak link, and it definitely was good as the season went on, but just not top 10. Jaden Daniels was doing so much since he's a mobile quarterback. So they didn't play like terribly great offensive lines in their playoff games, but it we know the talent of this defensive line, and they might get through a couple times against the Chiefs because this Chiefs offensive line, it's always top 10 with Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. Andy Reid always has premium offensive lines. It might not be top 3, but it's definitely top 10. And Patrick Mahomes actually needs that. The one time Mahomes did not have a top 10 offensive line, got destroyed in the Super Bowl. So, yeah, you're
Right.
Bucks reference. Um, so he needs that offensive line. Now, this is probably the key to the game. That defensive line versus the Chiefs offensive line. And I really don't know who's going to win. Because as far as defenses go, I actually think it's a wash because
Mm.
this Eagles defense is really good. I'm not going to deny it. Probably number one. But the Chiefs defense, man, they will get, they'll give up a couple scores. They'll let you into the game, but as soon as that game gets tight, Steve Spagnuolo sends in a blitz, AFC Championship game, sends in a crazy blitz out of nowhere and wins the game for him. That's how it's happened every single time. So, talent wise, Eagles, close situations, and probably, I mean, Vic Fangio versus Steve Spagnuolo is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking forward to it. We got two of the greatest defensive minds going at it. They've been in the league for decades, so I think it's going to be a real treat to watch. Um, but as far as tight situations, the um, I trust the Chiefs more on this one. So I personally think the defenses are a wash.
That's fair. And you do kind of bring up an interesting debate point where it's like, okay, who are you going to take? Are you going to take the defense that's better on paper and yielded, better results, or are you going to take the defense that was still excellent in its own right, maybe not as good, but they also have, who I think most people would agree, even Eagles fans would agree that Spags is the better play caller than Fangio is, and Fangio himself is an excellent play caller as well. So I agree with you. This is going to be a very very fun coaching matchup to see. Now let's get to the special teams, and when I say special teams, that I'm mainly just going to focus on the kickers here. Harrison Butker versus Jake Elliott. Both fantastic kickers, but I'm going to take Harrison Butker. Butker to me is a top three, top four kicker in the league, and I just trust him in a clutch situation more than I would trust Jake Elliott. What about you?
Yeah, obviously, I'm a little biased. I'm Catholic, so I'm a little biased toward Bucker. But I really do think he is the best kicker in the league. Now, Brandon Aubrey is also up there. It used to be Justin Tucker, but he has struggled really, at least according to his standards, struggled really bad.
Yeah,
So I would take Bucker over Elliott. Elliott also struggled this year, but he's made all of his playoff kicks this season, so that's a good sign. I don't think he'll struggle in the Super Bowl. But the thing with Butker, just like when we had Robbie Gould, has not missed a playoff kick in his career, and that is something very impressive. And I remember in the when they played the AFC Championship game, they showed the stat. Butker, I believe, is 11 for 11
mm,
in last 2 minute kicks. So I would definitely trust him pretty much more than any other kicker in the league, really, at this point. So yeah, I would definitely take Bucker. As far as I actually do like punting a little bit, I think Matt Ariza is pretty good. He might get a couple balls He might pin the Eagles offense down a couple times. I like him a little bit more as well than the Eagles punter. I think it's Braden Mann. I think Ariza had a little bit more of a better season, I believe. So I would also take the Chiefs' coverage and punting unit over the Eagles as well. So yeah, that was that.
Okay. All right. So far for me, I've given the advantage on offense to the Eagles, or excuse me, offense to the Chiefs, defense to the Eagles, special teams to the Chiefs. Where for you, it's offense, offense Chiefs, defense a tie, and special teams to the Chiefs. So either way, the Chiefs are winning most of our categories. Now let's get to coaching, and I feel like there's no point in discussing. It's obviously Andy Reid, but we can still discuss it because I do have some things that I want to say, about Sirianni. Um, well, you know, when it comes to Andy Reid, I mean, what is there to say about him? I mean, he's one of the best coaches of all time, and I think you can even make a case that he may have now surpassed Bill Belichick as the best coach in NFL history. Maybe that's a hot take. Maybe not. That can be a discussion for another time. But there's really not a lot to say about Andy Reid because at the end of the day, his resume speaks for itself. Now, as for Nick Sirianni, Thad, we talked about before how Sirianni was on the hot seat end of last season and beginning of this season. And when you think about it, you know, Nick Sirianni is the Ryan Day of the NFL. Everybody hates his guts, but all he does is win. And I'm kind of torn on this because listen, I don't know if Sirianni. Well, all right. I think enough time has passed for me to say that okay. I don't think Sirianni is a bad coach per se, but I also don't know if he's like great. What he is great at is hiring, good coordinators, and hiring coordinators is part of the head coach's job, right? So again, I don't know if Sirianni is a great coach per se, but he's at least great at hiring coordinators, so he has that going for him. What do you think?
I actually, I would chalk that more up to Howie Roseman as hiring the coordinators because now I like you said I don't know if Sirianni's a bad head coach. At least he's average because he's been to
Yeah,
two Super Bowls and it's hard to reach a Super Bowl
I mean
with
he's been there. Yeah, like he's been there. I think 4, maybe 5 years. Like he's never had a losing season. I mean, at some point, enough time passes by where you can determine if a guy is truly bad or truly good. And I don't think you can logically say that Sirianni is a bad coach because you don't win that many games by accident.
yeah, and that's totally true. But in order to, have success, he's had to have good coordinators. Like the first year they went to the Super Bowl, they had really good coordinators. Um, I forgot who the offensive coordinator was.
It was it was the guy who's the head coach for the Colts, and
Oh,
then
Colts, yeah, yeah. Shane Steichen.
yes,
That's yeah. So you had Shane Steichen, who's pretty good, and you had Matt Eberflus, who's a really good defensive coordinator. Wait, was it Matt Eberflus?
no. If you're talking about when they went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, it was Jonathan Gannon.
Jonathan Gannon, that's right. Okay, yeah. Cardinals head coach, that's right. So yeah, they were really good coordinators. But as soon as the last year, those troubles, they won 10 games. Like, oh, yeah, this team is really good. But the problem down the stretch was the coordinators. You had Matt Patricia as your offensive coordinator. That
Oh
was
yeah,
that was so weird.
that was such a bad hire.
Yeah, that was really bizarre. And then so then this year, they had to go in because they heard all offseason how bad those coordinators were. Like, let's get the best ones. Kellen Moore, great offensive coordinator from the Cowboys. Vic Fangio, everyone already knows. We've already talked about him. So as far as Nick Sirianni is, like I don't know. He's not bad, like I've said, but I don't know if he's even good because he doesn't call the plays. He's more of the GM type coach. He's more of the along the lines of a Dan Campbell, a rah rah kind of thing. The reason people don't like him, I mean, at least why I don't like him, is he acts very childish. at certain times, and it puts me off. Now he is in the Super Bowl. I can't deny that, but there's just something off. And if he wins the Super Bowl, great. I'll think he's a good coach if they win. But until then, I'm still very confused by him. So
Mm.
that, that's where I land
I,
on him.
I tell you what, Sirianni does have one thing going for him. He is, and Eagles fans, if you're watching this, correct me if I am wrong in this, but I believe he is the only coach in that team's history to take them to multiple Super Bowl appearances. So say whatever you want about the guy. I don't particularly like him either. I think he's a very unlikable guy, right? But at the end of the day, the results do speak for themselves. So overall, I think we're both in agreement here, Thad. We're gonna give the coaching advantage to Andy Reid. So yeah, so the Chiefs have pretty much won most of our categories. Now, before we get into predictions, Thad, I want to get into what it would mean for either team if they win the Super Bowl. Now, what would it mean for the Chiefs? Well, it would mean that their dynasty is unquestioned. They would become the first team in NFL history to win three Super Bowls in a row. It's never been done before. Now we have had NFL teams win three championships in a row, but that was before the Super Bowl era. In the Super Bowl era, we've never had it happen before. If the Chiefs win this Sunday, they will be the first team to do that, right? And listen, we can say whatever we want about all the close calls that they've had, not looking dominant and all that. But at the end of the day, wins are what matters. And if they win their third Super Bowl in a row, that's all anybody is going to remember. And Patrick Mahomes will be inching ever so closely to overtaking Tom Brady as the GOAT. I don't think he's there yet, but he will be inching closer. Now, as for the Eagles, if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, it'll mean a couple of things. One, it'll essentially be redemption for Sirianni because as we've been talking about, he was on the hot seat in the beginning of the season. Everybody hates him, but you win the Super Bowl, everybody's going to love you. But beyond that, what it also means, Thad, is that if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, they will be the first team in quite some time. Like they will be the first team in quite some time to win the Super Bowl because when was the last time that a run first team even won the Super Bowl, right? Like let's talk about the teams that have won it all. Obviously the Chiefs, right? You got Patrick Mahomes. You're not going to be run first with Patrick Mahomes. The Rams won it a few years ago when Cooper Cup had, in my opinion, probably the best receiving season of all time, certainly of the 21st century. Tom Brady with the Patriots, and then eventually the Bucks, right? Like these are all teams that were pass first. When was the last time a run first team won the Super Bowl? The Seahawks a little over 10 years ago, maybe. That's the last time I can remember. So yeah, if the Eagles do win it, it will be the first time in a while that a team with a run first mentality wins it all because we have not seen that in quite some time.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be impressive because especially since the big big passing season from 2013. It was the big Peyton Manning season.
Yep.
The one the Seahawks, blew them out in the Super Bowl. That season had the most passing yards, and we saw a shift in the league toward more passing. And then we heard like a couple years ago, the death of the running back. Well, the running back has come with a vengeance, and we've had the first one in like you said, like 10, 15 years where a run first team is in the Super Bowl. So I think it's pretty fun, and I'm really glad that it's happening because we've probably seen too much passing. I don't know. And I remember in the beginning of the season, everyone was getting mad about the Tampa 2 defense and like
Yeah.
quarterbacks weren't throwing it.
Yeah.
Well, it's allowed the running backs to thrive, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a really fun matchup. Um, but yeah, we really haven't seen a team like this since the second Seahawks Super Bowl team.
Yeah, and how like there might even be some pushback against that Seahawks team being a run first team. I don't know if they were a run first team. I mean that was Russell Wilson's second season in the league, and Russell Wilson was a very good passer back then. But my point is, it's been a long, long, long while since we have seen a team with a run first mentality uh, win it all. If it wasn't since the Seahawks, then yeah, like I said, it has been a very long while. Now let's get into our predictions. And Thad, I actually want to hear your prediction first. Who do you think is going to win and why? And give me your score prediction as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I actually, unfortunately, there was the Super Bowl 2 years ago was the first Super Bowl I missed since I started watching football about 10 years ago.
Were you
Uh,
watching? Is it because you were working that day?
no, I was actually in Rome, and it was
Oh,
at
cool.
2 o'clock in the morning. It was a funny story. I should tell you about it. Um, it was in Rome, and like very early in the morning, and I was actually going to go out. In Rome. There's a Steelers bar, like a bar full of a bunch of Steelers fans. Apparently, I actually heard about it on a Sunday Night Football game. I'm like, oh, maybe I should go there. But then I was too tired because we were going to wake up early in the morning anyway. So I watched like the first quarter and then I fell asleep. So I missed out on it. I'm not going to miss out on this one, definitely this time. But rewatching the one from 2 years ago, really exciting, really high scoring game as far as Super Bowls went. It's not going to go that way this time.
Hmm.
I do think teams are going to put up at least 2 touchdowns apiece, but the defensive coordinators are, well, Spagnuolo is still there. He gave up 35 points to that impressive Eagles offense last time. But Eagles have a better defensive coordinator this time. But one thing to note is Vic Fangio has not won a game against an Andy Reid offense ever, I believe.
Oh,
He
wow.
is 0 for 8. So that
That's
is
interesting.
something to keep in mind against it. So I, like I said, I cannot bet against the Chiefs for this game. Much as I want it to be, as high scoring, as everyone wants it to be, this will be a lower scoring affair. Chiefs are going to pull it out in the end like they always do because they have won freaking what 7 or 8 straight playoff games. Like that is insane. So I'm not going to bet against the Chiefs. Crunch time, they're going to take advantage of it. Um, Give me the Chiefs and a normal looking score, 24-21.
Okay, okay. All right, close game there. So, uh,
Probably a Butker field goal with like 59 seconds left.
yeah, for sure. Well, as for me, you know, I gave the Chiefs the advantage in most of the categories. But I'm going to take the Eagles in this one, Thad, and for a few reasons. Number one, I think people are forgetting about the revenge factor here, right? They lost to the Chiefs 2 years ago, and they have Jalen Hurts was the quarterback back then, and he's the quarterback now, and so revenge will be on his mind. And the Eagles obviously have a much better running back now. I don't even remember who their top running back was. Uh, back then, right? But also, even though the Chiefs know how to
Okay.
win,
The Eagles running back?
yeah, from 2 years ago, do you remember who he was?
Yeah, it was Miles Sanders.
Oh yeah, Miles Sanders.
I had him on fantasy that year. He actually had a pretty good year
Yeah, I totally
on
forgot
that
about
offensive
him.
line.
And then also for the Chiefs, even though the Chiefs do know how to win, I also think that when you win, when you win so many close games, eventually it's going to catch up to you, especially against a team that can match up well with you, which I think the Eagles do, right? And so I think I'm going to take the Eagles 23-13 over the Chiefs. I think revenge will be on their minds, and as I said before, I think when you win so many close games for that long, it catches up to you. It catches up to you eventually. So I could be wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if I am wrong. But I'm gonna take the Eagles here in a 10-point victory.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
That's certainly that's certainly a score prediction. So, all
yeah,
righty.
and maybe we'll finally never ever hear from Taylor Swift again. But who am I kidding? That's not gonna happen. But folks, thank you so much again for tuning into another episode of Total Sports Talk. Um, comment below what you agree with, what you disagree with. Add any takes that and I didn't have ourselves, and we'll see y'all next time. But in the meantime, I'm David Street, and this is Thad.